So this session will be about front-end tooling, which is a huge universe, as we've seen from some of the other talks already on API communication and front-end ops. So I think, like, especially compared to back-end, front-end is kind of like, experiencing constant churn. There's like a new JavaScript framework every year or 6 months. There's tons of just third-party tools and libraries and random things you can, drop into your app. And especially if you're kind of, following Reddit or Hacker News, you might seem like super lost and, it's never clear, like, when, you should start exploring something, or if it makes sense for your project. So I'll throw in some memes here for fun. But yeah, like, as a front-end developer, I'm sure like some of you can relate to some of these.
They're all hot dogs, so
it's yeah, like sea of buzzwords. This is like common feeling you can even for something like managing state within React. There's like several options, right? But I think the goal overall for this session is to kind of get some clarity for how to kind of navigate this sea of tools, and kind of help answer this question. Like, you come across some tool, like, should I use this? Should I explore this for something I'm working on? And I would say kind of the high level answer is, you always kind of want to choose the right tool for the job, not just because someone online likes it or it's a shiny new thing that you just heard about. And there's some kind of condition here, which is, it needs to be the right fit for the right job, but also at the right time and given like the real world constraints you have working with your team and your company. So things like money, time, experience, and size of the team. Those should all factor in to kind of, this type of decision. So I think one of the main things I want to do in this session is really frame a lot of the tooling, popular tooling, in terms of like the problems that it solves, and really trying to pinpoint, like, hey, I have this problem. This is the type of tool I need, and kind of expressing, like looking at tools from the perspective of like what problem does the tool solve. And kind of beyond that, trying to understand, is this a tool that helps the end user experience? Does it help the developers during the development lifecycle, or is it kind of helping some business need? So that's kind of how we'll kind of frame the discussion. But basically, I'll kind of lead the discussion, and I'm hoping for a lot of participation. So I'll kind of go through basically a number of problems we've experienced at Markup on the front end. And then some of the solutions we've come up with, some things we are looking forward to. And then I'll ask what other people are doing for those same problems at other companies. So first, we'll have a discussion, basically in that context of, problem and solution. After that discussion, we can kind of go through some general principles for like how to make a decision about, choosing a tool that you can kind of take and use in the future. And then hopefully, you guys benefit from that clarity. So we'll kind of start just looking at some of the various tools that we've used to solve some of the problems and why. So first, let's start with user experience. One of the main things there is you want to catch bugs early. You don't want to have bugs in production, obviously. So, one of the things in JavaScript is like, how do you avoid accidentally accessing like an undefined property or assuming a wrong type? And this is kind of general. This is like a specific instance of this general problem with, a dynamically typed language like JavaScript. How do you manage your type safety? So in Markup, we use TypeScript. Obviously, it'll compile your code, let you know if there's any, any fields you're accessing that don't exist, or you're assuming, like you're trying to call map on something that's on an array, things like that. I know some other Hive companies don't use TypeScript, so I'm curious like how you guys, if you guys have a good solution for this, or what you guys do. Age that you can talk about Boom Jam.
Yeah. Hey, for those of Age and Boom Jam. We are not using TypeScript in general, although Nate is using it for I think it was a matter of thing that's going to take your brain, developer brain power and time to figure out and work through. There's a few things that you can use as alternatives. They're kind of lighter versions of that. One is most of the IDEs will actually do a lot of type checking, so it's kind of like having TypeScript without having it. I know WebStorm does. I imagine you can have things like making sure you have a ESM rule that forces you to have your prop types in your components so that React will complain. I don't know what the point is where, a company needs to decide, oh, we should use TypeScript or Flow or whatever now, because I've used it in 2 previous jobs. I definitely found just me not knowing enough about TypeScript, but even after using it for like a year, I spent time on some more complex things, just figuring out why the hell kept complaining about certain things, and it would take a long time to work for its own sake, and it wasn't really helping too much. But when there were many times where I just caught stuff where like the input wasn't matching the output, I was like, oh, TypeScript just saved my ass. So it's kind of very much.
Yeah, I think in my experience at Markov, like I do find myself fighting the TypeScript compiler, like learning how to solve certain use cases, but it has saved my ass so many times. Like, and it was kind of an early decision once we had multiple front-end engineers. We kind of just decided like, hey, let's just bite the bullet, do everything in TypeScript up front, and like.
Yeah, I think that's it. Like, I've used JavaScript and then moved to TypeScript recently, and so it's annoying, right? The way I'm able to rationalize it is that how much time I put in learning it and studying correctly right now, say, developer 2 years from now to read it and automatically understand or run it the way how the code was flowing and what types of going to what. That's how I rationalize it. I don't have I think a good metric for when you move from Java to TypeScript would be that.
Oh, which we do.
And we have that again. All right. Successful conference.
Yeah. Well, along those lines, do you all expect hiring to be even harder, given that, right? I mean, like, it's cool that people within you can do type. Well,
not really. It's like any other library. It's like, would you really not hire someone if they don't know Redux? Or if they don't know React query?
Yeah, I think it's something you consider, but they should be able to learn it, right? Yeah. I think that's the expectation.
There's one last criticism on TypeScript, which I love in a lot of ways, but it feels like you could do like, I don't know, let's say, I'm going to say arbitrary number, like 90% of the things you're like, okay, I figured this out, I can do it. Then when you hit that 10% of things that are really complicated, I feel like that's what I would just spend so much time just trying to figure out how these types should work. And, and granted, they were complicated cases, but there were things that actually came up in my last job, so it wasn't like someone was just thinking of weird cases. Just like,
I came across that, and it was more than 10% for me.
Yeah.
Because I just realized I didn't know. So way I was kind to myself. Like I would just do ts ignore and forget.
Yeah. So there are ways around.
Any, but like when
exactly.
when your boss is going, you can't use any, and they put a ps lint rule, no any, right?
Yeah. So
And then you ignore it.
I mean, and maybe there's people who haven't used TypeScript, like unknown, that can be very powerful versus any, but then you have to know that by, doing a lot more research and a lot more looking at blog posts, and it's like, how much time do you spend becoming an expert at TypeScript versus like, I would just like to be better at JavaScript and like my core thing,
I think you get 50% of stuff done much better. Just if you did your types for the stuff you're getting from the API or sending to the API. Just doing that, you are better off than whatever you were doing with ES. Even if everything else in your code is with ES. And that is relatively easy to do because of most likely your package is statically typed.
Actually, that brings up a question that I think about a lot is like, how much do people, I think everybody thinks it's an all or nothing proposition, like you're all in on TypeScript or you're not. How much do you go, well, I'm going to try to do this subset of types or these kind of types, or maybe just use TypeScript for this directory of stuff. I mean, I don't know how you guys experience that.
So I would say, it was different for us because we had very little code before we decided to adopt TypeScript. I think if you already have a JavaScript code base, like you can kind of gradually opt in, since TypeScript is like a superset of JavaScript, right? So you can kind of figure out, hey, let's start typing here, and then kind of expand it out a little.
That's how I try it.
Yeah.
Just be kind to yourself. Do it.
Yeah. So, full disclosure, I already have an answer to the question that I just asked, which was at my last job, we did the same thing. We had a full JavaScript code base and switched over to TypeScript, and they had to coexist, as we added stuff. There were certain times when we had to use JavaScript just for like some configuration files and things like that.
How about open source library you want to use and it tells you for your time? And it was Google's library who didn't provide the type and the contributors which they provide the type. And for one particular API, it was pretty complex. And there was a related question on the typing data as well. And the contributor themselves code is super complicated for me to, even I don't understand how to type it. If someone who provided the type doesn't know how to type that, and things like that. When we want to use some library and it doesn't provide that, that is the real thing.
Yeah.
Nice try. Who's the author?
Nice try.
But the way if you were to get the way we were around it is, we still see a one, but then you can have a .d or ts file.
That's how we.
Same thing goes for Material UI. If you use Material UI, the theme file has predetermined key like primary, secondary color, but if you like dark background or whatnot, then you have to override there. It's well documented, I think. You always override it and MP option.
All right, in the time, let's move on here.
It's not typed.
This is like kind of related, but separate bug source would be like, how do you make sure your front end and back end stay aligned in terms of the API contract? And then how do you know when either is breaking the contract? So for this, we obviously use TypeScript, but we also use something that's pretty cool, which is like OpenAPI. So basically our backend services will automatically generate all the schemas, and then they'll actually generate functions for all the like get and post requests as well. And so basically the front end will read their latest open API configuration and then generate all these typings that the front end can then consume. So if you can see in the inside here, we have this generated folder. So this gets all these are microservices our front end talks to at this point. but basically, we read their open API, we generate all these typings, and then this is what we get on the front end. So you can see all the fields for every interface. If there are like custom types, those are all, well defined down to the primitives. And then the other cool thing with APIs is instead of making like an actual Axios from the front end, we basically just call this function. And it has all the signature information and all the the response schema as well. So when we're writing code, we can basically call this function and then get code intelligence on like what are the fields that are available from my response.
The last thing you showed, the open API thing, is that just a script that you run from the front end, or is it something that's run
So
periodically?
it's like a big JSON file that gets generated from our Python backend. And then from the front end, we take that API JSON. It's like a
Open API has a tool
yeah.
which helps you generate the YAML or and it will generate the all types. So we do it on the build time.
That's what I was wondering. If it was like a book when you're building. Okay.
Yes, it's generated during build time. Yes. So whatever's the most up to date
And
schema.
Also, is your backend TypeScript as well, or are they both?
No. So we, I think, do we specify anything about TypeScript?
No, that's Python and
Yeah, the backend is written in Python, but I think the API, the Open API tool is like TypeScript.
Yeah, we specify Axios template with TypeScript. There are other templates also. TypeScript.
To me, that's the huge advantage of TypeScript, is to be able to sure that you're matching
Yeah.
contractors.
So if a field gets renamed or goes away or something, like the front end things, like it breaks on our dev. Yeah.
And then would that be how would that work with versioning? Is there any
Versioning of API?
Yeah.
Right now we're not very like
so it's left on the developer.
formal. Yeah. But at least immediately, like, hey, this thing changed, this thing broke.
There are a few backend developers, so we just like, hey, it doesn't work. Oh yeah, here's why.
Anyone else have other solutions? I guess it's kind of manual in certain cases here. Yeah, you just talk to people.
Yeah, it doesn't scale very well. Like after 4 or 5 people.
How do you document your contracts if you don't use TypeScript?
Protocols.
Okay.
So, even a lot of communities.
Cool.
There are our clients and clients are that's what we find.
Cool. Yeah, and then how do you make sure new code you're introducing doesn't break your major workflows? So this doesn't need to be typing related, but yeah, just in general, like how do you make sure something didn't break? That's important. So mainly what we do at Markov is we use Cypress to do basically integration testing, and then every PR will run like our suite, and basically except for like the newest features, we have all of our major workflows kind of captured in that. So if something breaks, we know as soon as the PR gets raised.
So the Sass that comes with it?
Yes. Well, not a test, but a suite of Cypress tests. Yeah.
And is there a pattern that you all would follow? Meaning, each test should contain at least these two things.
What do you mean? No, we don't care about coverage too much. It's more just like, hey, can the user make this series of actions and get this result? And it might be across a few pages, or it might be within a certain context. But it's kind of just like, yeah, how we've defined a major workflow, basically. Any other approaches people take?
Well, manual testing.
Manual testing, yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
So, like, it's very hard to avoid the transition that you have when you're developing something and writing the test for it. So, I've tried to a couple of times.
Is don't test your own code, or at least if you're testing it, have someone else look at it, because we're always so biased, no matter how we try not to be, that our code is working. And as we mentioned in that previous session here, but here, additionally, we have that GitHub action where every commit to a PR creates an instance that can be spun up, and that, whether it's developers or product manager or QA people, can test that instance, and it uses the same data as our server. So
That's really nice, yeah.
Yeah, so that's really helpful.
And another problem with testing that I often run into.
Yeah, I think everybody has that problem. And that tool that you were talking about earlier, where it strips out fraud, AI data, so you can use the exact same.
Cool. So moving on, so under user experience also, you want to have your UI be consistent, basically. So, how do you guys manage CSS styles, and specifically, how do you make sure your styles are consistent, and then you're also avoiding issues like style bleeding, or like maybe you scope CSS using something, or handle that using some other pattern. At Markov, we are basically using style components for the scoping of CSS, and then we integrate that with our with another library called styled system, which basically lets us define a theme and then pick like colors or fonts or things like that from the theme. So here's kind of like a random style component I picked out, but you can see like there's basically like a theme provider at the top of our app, and then you can access through these styles the theme, and then pick off any properties you want to access that way. Any other approaches people take in terms of managing CSS?
What do you think of CSS modules? It was before that. It solved this problem.
Yeah, same kind of solution. Yeah, I think we were just more familiar with styled components as our team.
My feeling is, if you're not going to use for the css-in-js solution, very least use CSS modules. You know everything, because otherwise, if you're using just files, you're just going to
Yeah, and there's like BEM or like
BEM, yeah.
naming conventions to kind of help with that. But
yeah, it kind of relies, I guess, on doing the same.
Yeah, it requires a lot of discipline for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, so yeah, we'll probably talk about this more in this session tomorrow about the UI. Using MUI, and it uses its own flavor of css-in-js, which is emotion. Very similar to style components, but you have a choice. You either use the styles function, or it has something called a prop called SX, which all the components can use. Which at first, Max was pushing it, and I was like, I don't like it. It does have the advantage of keeping everything inside JSX, so you're not scrolling back and forth, or you were saying you even have these in separate files sometimes, right?
Yeah, so basically we, if there's enough styles we want to put, we don't want to like clutter up the UI markup. So then we'll put something like this in a separate like .style file and then import it into the component where it gets used.
I've become a fan of the SX stuff because it's different than something like Tailwind, which has a lot of extra crap that you have to wade through. I mean, it's still, it looks like styling like we're used to, either a JS object or CSS. And you still have a lot of the advantages of being able to dynamically pass in stuff. So, one option.
Does anyone use Tailwind out of curiosity?
Yeah. We used to use it, and we actually switched maybe like 2 months ago or something.
Okay.
But, I mean, it just gets messy. Like when you're trying to like look at code, and
There's too many.
you're like empty my dash one, and you're like, oh god, and it's just a line. And I feel like you end up adding a lot of stuff that's not easier than it.
Yeah,
it's much cleaner nowadays.
Yeah, we've all been working on putting stuff from like a V1 into V2, and part of that is taking out Tailwind. And I've noticed, like, even with a lot of props inside SX declarations, the code is so much cleaner. There's just a lot less stuff. And it just kind of feels like some people love Tailwind, but I feel like it's really good when you're doing steps or trying to like quickly, you know, prototype stuff. It's great because it can be very simple. But a lot of the SX stuff, it ends up having shortcuts that look very similar to Tailwinds. So, you know, but you end up using them.
So also along the lines of kind of UI consistency, how do you make sure that your component implementation actually matches the design, assuming that you have designers design?
That headline would be doing is part of the repository. And when we see the screenshot.
That's pretty cool. I don't think Rohit has GitHub access, right?
That's easy to fix.
Yeah, true.
Wait, you said the screenshot is
on a PR or something, you can screenshot.
Yeah. So, Russ, I think Alex can say it better than me, but we've had a designer problem. We've gone through a bunch of short time. So, we hard to kind of have the designers we've had use Figma. I don't know if everyone else is using that. Yeah. Which can help a lot. I mean, the designer, if you as a developer try to use Figma, it's Figma. But it can be cool because a lot of this stuff, it's just CSS, the output CSS that you can actually look at. And of course, there's Storybook, and I don't know how many people are using it.
Yeah, so I was going to say at Markup, we use Storybook we kind of have a core design system set of components, and then we'll kind of combine and compose those to make larger UI components. So we basically have Storybook for most of those design, like they're kind of like atoms and molecules, basically. Like a UI kit?
Yeah, it does actually. We were using the MUI kit. I think Figma's great. I mean, that might be enough for us when we get a design.
Yeah, it's quite easy to, once you have a plugin, it's quite easy to translate the design into what you're doing.
Yeah.
GS.
Yeah. Also, if you don't want to go to the trouble of storybook, maybe an interim or earlier thing is you could just have a hidden page on your site where you just throw up, where you throw on components that you've made, and anyone can just look at it instead of having to search through the site, or maybe components that aren't on the site yet, but you're trying to figure it out.
It's for the same spirit as Storybook, but just
Yeah, just
not.
easier,
Yeah, you don't have to do it their way.
Yeah, it's not trying to make everything dynamic.
We were doing that. So recently, within the last 2 months, we've done we're going through a phase of like our V1 of the UI to our V2 of the UI, and already knowing what the third version will look like. So I don't know when we had the designers that we hired, let's say 2 months, for the last month. We'll see if it plays out really well. We'll not trigger it. But the first month that we met with them, the first thing that we did was having the designers and the front engineers be part of the same kind of like design or concept part of it instead of bringing it in later. Because what was happening at first when we saw the mocks in, we're like, A, this doesn't look like mature UI. Like, there's making components
At random.
and the feedback we gave to them was, if we want to ship it fast, let's see what we have now and how we can improve that better. Ultimately knowing that there's a third version of this where it's what we want it to look like, the feel of it, but how can we work there next phase. So the first month was trying to get them to align with us, having that relationship. And now we're just able to output a lot more things. We have one front engineer that's dedicated to doing a lot of heavy lifting, so like the very about that. But on the other side, knowing about tables, right, things that are going to change with global components, you've been able to go back and forth with like what our UI kind of UX experience and what we as a front end team can pull out or also to develop new features. And the other thing we also do that too, where we have like design helpers. So like all the plugins, different states, stuff like that, which was really helpful when we were doing because if you had to go to each file or each page, make sure that it worked, as long as we applied that same kind of component and that same prop, we were pretty comfortable knowing that button was going to break or that card wasn't going to.
Yeah, the point you made about developers being part of the design process, I think is extremely important because in all the places I work, as good as it's been, I feel like a designer who really pays attention to web and mobile UX is a rare person indeed. And you to be there early in the process to go, you're not thinking about this, you're not thinking about what it looks like with this thing.
And then especially interactions as well. Like
interactions.
What
is it going to look like when there's 10,000 rows of data? Are you going to pagine it, or are you going to whatever? So that's, and no matter how good they are, it seems like most of them.
Yeah, edge cases and stuff. Yeah.
But that can be changed too. Like again, I think that for web browsers, like we have an Excel view, which is like one for laptop and your display, and one for mobile. And he developed all the three designs.
That's good.
Yeah, and all the three designs. As simple as you pick one example.
Yeah, and designers in Figma can also set up a bunch of interactions, right? So they can display how interactions. Instead of having to code everything out first.
And the last thing I'll add about this, especially with big data, is being able to have that interaction between the developer and the designer. At least for us, it's helped us when we're designing backend, especially for the service. Because we want to just say, hey, here's the data, do it. But now we're getting at certain scales where something, I think, as of last week, downable row, they designed it to have like 10. But we did it of like we're ingesting some job or something, and that thing will have 1,000. And then when we designed it, we didn't design it to have 1,000. So we're like, oh, we can add some pagination to the API because it's not this, it's going to break, it's slow. So why is that?
every time somebody starts building via screen or table, right? But nobody thinks about validation. But it's the most common thing that you need to do.
There must be something in human nature that just doesn't. It just wants to see the thing that's right in front of you.
And filtering.
Filtering still, like, you know, think about, okay, what filter, how you want, but validation, like, I'm showing a list. This will have, if we're successful, meaning if we're actually, you know, big and important and all of that, the list will have hundreds, maybe thousands of items. But it usually is not the first version. My question is, why is it not in the first version? Because pagination is such a common thing.
Right, correct. But if you add the extra time, development time on the top of it.
Why do you need to spend? It's like, that's just me, just like the same thing as showing something in the list. It should be just automatic. Why is it not? Generally, why is it not?
Slides that people can pull and then let's say you render the first page, and you just implement that component to render that thing.
But can't you put an abstraction on top of that?
Yeah,
so
sure.
that pagination
That's
is
the
another thing.
another wrappers on the top of that. So if you
you have to think through that thing. And this is about Django because like Django and Raven, all the APIs by default have pagination by default. Like you just have it. So your UI already knows that it can paginate. But over here, the developer, it's left to the developer.
But why doesn't someone, I mean, if it's something that everybody needs to do, so why, like, oh yeah, I need an offset and a limit, and sure, the backend needs to support that, and front end needs to support that, and your table is done. Why don't people develop that?
well, in terms of the front end, I mean that's where things like MUI components come in, because all that stuff.
So if you
Then why is it that in every company?
There's certain problems we solve over and over.
Pagination is always like,
It's like,
your passenger is like an UI component that you can use. It's almost always four sides. Missing the four sides.
So let's just all agree right now that we're not going to overload that.
it's the one takeaway.
see, I will remember that you said that. next lightning
I'm
demos.
deciding that's Alex for.
Next lightning demos, when I see a table without pagination.
All right,
I'm
I'll
working on the problem, so now I have to add it.
Yeah. There you go. Can do it.
I'll speed through the next few here, but so under user experience too, like thinking about product ease of use, like you want new users who are being onboarded to know about the key product features, right? So at Markup we use a tool called UserFlow. Basically, so when you log in for the first time, you get this dialog, and basically it'll take you through a few steps, kind of just highlighting the key areas of the app, explaining like what you can do in each little section. And it's basically just to get the user acquainted with the UI and what they can do in different areas. So I'm curious if people use other products, or has anyone like rolled their own app tour or anything like that?
Alex, what is the thing we use on all the modals that people can click on to all the feedback thing? Either of us should remember what it's called.
It's kind of cool because does it just take a snapshot, right?
Right.
I think you have your tools for it already.
But it's,
No.
I thought it was hard. It's not hard.
Anyway, yeah, like you were saying, it's you can just type, "Oh, I have a problem with this," but you can also click a button.
User back.
User back.
User back.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And you can take a screenshot and include it. And so for our stuff, we have a bunch of people we call pioneers, who are like the early alpha testers, not even beta testers. And so much of the stuff we get back to them is through that.
But
It's really easy.
do you kind of proactively show off any features of that or anything before they question?
I think, so what happens is our PM sends out, I think she has people in Slack or in, what do you call the other thing? Discord, thank you. And sends out a message like every 2 weeks maybe of features. And she's doing that as well. Now that we have more beta testers, and she's doing that, she's saying, you know,
so this tool is pretty cool. Like, you basically give it the URL, and then it will let you select elements and say like, hey, when the user hovers this element, take this step of the workflow. And then you basically just define a bunch of steps, and then the user can skip out of this tour at any point.
We have a tour for new users that is pretty bare bones. Just homemade, basically.
Oh, okay.
It's highlighting a couple things.
Yeah.
You know, it's step one, highlight this. Next, go to highlight this.
But you guys built it.
Yes. I mean, I didn't have any.
We're using some library, but
Oh, are we?
it's pretty like
It's pretty
Nice.
bare bones.
Okay, cool.
Like it,
React or
yeah.
And then so this would really just update. Like, if I said I don't want to keep seeing this.
Yeah, so the way we've set it up is it's only activated when you go to this route/tour. And we basically say, when you finish onboarding, we send you there. And then that just triggers this thing, and then it takes you basically to the route. So it's just like a one-time trigger. It's not like every time you log on. Also along the lines of product ease of use. So how do you provide users with docs or things like, you know, product concepts or how-to guides? So we've kind of, we started with, do we have something for Gitbook actually? I think we had internal documentation kind of on one page of our product. And then we migrated to Gitbook. So now we have like very nice looking docs. Basically, users can kind of go through the guides to set up our product, and then as well as get some kind of concepts. And we're also looking at another tool. I think it's from README. It's just also nice docs. Like, but I'm curious what other people do for user documentation.
in our case.
Yes. Yeah, our users are developers, I guess, yeah.
Prior to marketing versus so I imagine
Yeah, you guys are very early.
marketing site will just be a lot of traditional.
Anyone else have another docs solution?
README.
README? Are you guys pretty satisfied with that? Because we were looking at
Oh yeah. How hard or easy was it? Example, I think we have maybe 5 products that we have at least one page for. And at the beginning, it just started with like a help and a doc on like the main landing. But now, as you start doing like different features, for example, like for us, you want to connect there's a button right next to the help, and it'll send them there, and then we'll see if that's enough. Or not enough. That's the next step that we're doing. And after that, hopefully we'll start finding the pain points on it, and then they can just, with that button, it'll get them directly to that. And you just map out like what the URL would be.
Cool.
So,
How do you guys all push it?
Gitbook is hosted. Like they host this. Yeah.
But it is developer.markdown.com.
Yeah, so we have a custom domain providing to them. Yeah.
We do catch this, we used to do reading. Now, we've moved over to Zendesk. I'm actually not. I personally.
That's only for customer facing docs.
Is it still okay?
So I'm still doing what developer docs is too.
So readme. Yeah, I've been happy with the readme.
Yeah, it looks very nice. I think it's a little pricier than Gitbook, but
This price, yeah.
Cool.
Docker storage in the past. It's too.
Yeah, I'll kind of quickly touch on these. So I'm calling this kind of perceived performance. So there's kind of like actual performance, and then there's things you can do to make things feel faster, right? So we don't have too much focus on performance at this stage of markup, but I'm curious if people have certain metrics that they hit, or like you know, they're making sure that they're staying within in terms of like page load or you know bundle size or things like that.
The one thing I remember talking about is that somewhere along the line of V2, there was a lot of improvements. Huge difference was just the back end performance. People, some of our pioneers were actually going, wow, the site is so fast now. So, I mean, just that alone is a huge thing without us messing with any kind of React performance.
Okay. You guys aren't using like Lighthouse or any like
No, I use that. I think as I talked to you, my last job was entirely dependent on SEO. And Lighthouse trying to satisfy Google. Just doing this to get our Lighthouse scores up. You know, at a certain point, you're going for. I think it's really useful for just taking a general look at how your site's performing, because it does give you a lot of suggestions, a lot of help, saying, you know, this is what you could do to improve this.
Yeah,
so,
and it's like performance and SEO and
yeah,
accessibility as well. Yeah, and that's like you know only optimize when you need to, right?
Right.
As well, so.
And then like seeing that if you use lazy on the route.
Yeah, like lazy loading.
Yeah.
Code splitting.
Oh, and I don't know if it's perceived or active ones, but bundle phobia is definitely
Oh yeah.
We all use a ton of NPM packages.
Yeah, I love bundle phobia. Yeah, in terms of perceived performance, so I wonder if anyone else does anything to make like backend related operations feel fast. So one thing we do at Markov is, so we use React Query for our server state, and basically React Query will let you do like optimistic UI updates. So I have kind of a long code example here, but essentially, if you have, like, let's say you get a list of data from somewhere, and then you have another operation that will change the state of one of those pieces of data. You don't have to wait for that call to finish necessarily. So the way this works in React Query is you would define like what happens when you actually call that mutation, which right now this is triggering some or re-triggering some task that's been run. So basically the state or the status of that task we expect to change as a result. So what this is doing is saying when the user calls the retrigger, look at that list of tasks that we had previously and kind of optimistically update that state. And then if there's some error with a server call, basically roll back to the previous state. So the user feels like, you know, their action is instantaneous, but we're kind of, you know, tricking them a little bit. But it's nice because it decouples, you know, the backend performance with like what user experiences. So I'm curious if anyone else kind of does optimistic UI updates or anything like that.
They are usually like once you go through the page, almost always on 4 and 4.
This is right.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, I realize we're running a little long. I might skip a couple of these other things too. Yeah, I know this was an ambitious talk. I think we talked about some of these topics in the front end ops discussion, but like building and deploying, updating changelog, for example. Yeah, going back to like getting user feedback. This is kind of more of a business need side, but we leverage this tool called, this one is Freshdesk, yeah.
This is similar to what we were talking about.
Yeah. But you said it's kind of built into different components, right? Or like available.
Yeah, I think we have it available
in different
I
areas.
can't remember if it's in the top nav, but we also have it in the top bar of all of our modals.
And it's just in the mobile. So it used to be into the bottom of the platform. But since we have an audio player that's in the bottom, we decided to just pin it to mobile.
Yeah.
And then like when you're not in a modal, it's pinned to the top of the nav bar. But before it used to be like at the bottom. So it's
Yeah.
of our audio player.
Does anyone have like security or compliance issues? We haven't really like encountered this at Markup too much, but yeah. So CSP, we use like SSL or TLS, obviously.
And the content actually. Added it up.
SEO, I remember Sage mentioned that was a big thing at his other company. I don't know if this is like, since we're making like web apps, I don't know how much this plays in versus.
Yeah, well, not so far, it hasn't been an issue. I think now that we have a marketing person, we're having a company build our marketing site. That's when it becomes more important.
Yeah.
We're mostly just trying to ensure that we have a good product first, but pretty soon we're going to start really pushing it.
So what's the process of?
No,
server-side
rendering. Server-side rendering. No, we're not doing any of that stuff. Server-side rendering or static site generation.
I don't think any of our companies right now need this. There was a company in the Hive called Rise Up. The product allowed non-profit organizations to create content. They did all the events that we're organizing. Here's the fundraiser we want. And we had like a mini CMS where it allowed them to create that content, and it was stored in a database. And we when user logged in and said, I want to search for organizations that work in innovation. So we would search those. Now, what we wanted to do was, just like Quora, when you guys use Quora. Quora is actually the ones who pioneered this kind of SEO, where you create static pages so that they're indexed by Google, but the pages are actually dynamic. Right? That's the thing. You have dynamic pages which you want them to be indexed by Google. So I don't think any of our companies right now have that kind of need. That similarly like next year.
We did that exact thing with Mischiefs at my last company because we needed high up in SEO. So everything was static, but then it could also be high dynamic.
Cool. All right, let me wrap this up. So that was a good discussion, I think. Let's try to like distill some of that into some principles that you guys can take away. So I think the first step should be always like identify your problem. Don't start with the tool, right? Understand what you need and then look for the tool, right? Because until you know what you actually need, it's impossible to assess how good a particular tool is, fitting. So what is your problem? Also, how important is it? Is it something you can delay and defer? Maybe you don't need a solution, or maybe you can get by with something minimal. Once you know like what the problem that you actually have is, you might be wondering, which tool to reach for, or should I roll my own solution? So step 2 should be determine whether to build or buy. There's a cost associated with each one, right? So cost of building obviously is going to take time. You'll kind of incur this maintenance cost probably, depending on how big the tool or whatever you're building is. And there might be some security concerns or things like that, where it's like, maybe I don't want to manage this. On the other hand, there's like the cost of buying something. You might have to do things their way. It might actually cost you money, and there might be some like learning or onboarding that the team has to go through to adopt that. Also, maybe now is not the right time to adopt a tool, but maybe when the team is bigger, when the problem is bigger, maybe that's the right time. So those are all things to consider. I think some general guidelines. If the problem is really small and trivial, probably just build it at first. If the problem requires like domain knowledge or has a lot of edge cases, probably reach for something that exists. Like if you need to manipulate dates, for example, or you need to deal with like localization, probably don't want to manage that yourself. And finally, if you decide to buy something, like assess your options. Sometimes tools do way more than what you need, and you should basically make a pragmatic choice. Like, going to be easiest for the team, what's going to be low effort, low buy-in, and then some other considerations. So if you have time to explore some alternative tools, it might be good to build a small proof of concept. And if not, maybe just consider going with what the team is most comfortable with, because we're all at early companies. Time and velocity is really important. Is it worth paying for the tool, and how much? Again, it could save you a lot of time as a team. So some things we're happy to pay for, like high charts, Auth0. Yeah, exactly. Like don't reinvent the wheel. And then ask around. Like, is there an option other people are happy with? We have like the Superset Hive as a resource, so ask someone who might have encountered the same problem. And then finally, like, what option will I be happier with, or will the team be happier with in a year? So things you might want to consider here are like maturity of the tool, popularity and activity of maintenance, how many GitHub stars, things like that. And then also like buy-in. Like if you want to avoid vendor lock-in or lock into a certain framework or mode, that's something you want to consider here. I think that was about it. So yeah, any other comments on basically how you think about tooling or how you decide between tools? Good versioning, basically. Yeah.
So that's React Native.
Or actually,
React Native has been at 0.8 for like 6 years.
Always exists. I also look at the versions going on too fast, too slow.
Mm-hmm.
And by mean too fast and too slow are very vague words.
Yeah.
Purposely.
Yeah.
Something to look for.
Yeah.
That can depend on what
Yeah.
it is.
Another thing would be React is not going to let you test at all.
Read the file now.
True.
Yeah.
So keep those in mind when you're
All right. I think I've gone a bit over, but thank you, everyone.